adjournment to order. Let's start with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Roll call. Kolecki. Here. Otto.
Here.
Steffens.
Here.
Lurkey.
Here.
Okay. Agenda. I'd like a motion to adopt the agenda for tonight's meeting.
I will second.
In front of you.
I will second that.
Second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Correspondence. I didn't see any correspondence tonight.
No.
Do you see any? None?
No.
Okay, great. Okay, so now this, we will open the public hearing dealing with case number JZBA 17005. This involves the Ann Arbor Dog Training Club at 1575 East North Territorial Road.
I'll support that motion.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay. Is there any discussion on this case?
Yes.
Would like to, please?
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We have reviewed the variance application submitted by Vanston O'Brien, Inc. on behalf of the Ann Arbor Dog Training Club to construct a new 18,000 square foot building on its existing site. The parcel is located on the north side of East North Territorial Road, about 1 mile east of the US 23 interchange, and is zoned GI, which is the General Industrial District. The proposed dog training club use, upon intensive discussion with the township, was considered as being similar to a kennel, which is permitted as a conditional use in the district. While the applicant has established to the satisfaction of the Planning Commission that the use is not a kennel, the use interpretation of being similar to another use makes it subject to the standards for kennels. Since it's a conditional use, it has to be subject to some standards. It's not a kennel, but that is the category under which it is being classified as being similar to. Hence, it has to meet the standards. The existing buildings on the site are non-conforming with respect to the required 200-foot setback from site property lines. No changes are proposed to the existing buildings, and these non-conformities may remain. The proposal to construct the new building at a non-conforming setback, however, requires a variance from this board. The proposal will require the following variance from the zoning ordinance. Article 24, Supplementary Regulations and Standards, Section 36-714, Kennels, subsection 2. 200-foot minimum setback is required from any property line. A 61-foot setback is proposed from the east property line. A 139-foot variance is being requested. At the time the applicant submitted an application for this proposal, a second variance was listed which said the minimum required lot size for kennels is 10 acres, and this existing parcel is 6.26 acres in size, and the applicant sought a variance from the lot size. However, this proposal is not reducing the size of the parcel in any way, shape, or form, or altering it. So this would be considered as an existing legal nonconformity. It does not need another variance. It is a legal justified size. There are specific standards in the ordinance that is dictated by state law based upon which the board needs to consider every request for variance, and I shall summarize those. The first one being strict compliance with restrictions governing area, setback, frontage, height, lot coverage, density, and other non-use matters will unreasonably prevent the owner from using a property for the permitted purpose or will render conformity with these restrictions unnecessarily burdensome. As I mentioned, the size is 6.26 acres when the minimum required lot size for kennels is 10 acres. This is an existing nonconformity. The smaller lot size, because it is slightly smaller than what is required for kennels, it limits the area available for building, and consequently the setbacks that can be proposed would also be reduced. Strict compliance with the ordinance standards would require a shifting of the proposed building westwards. Now, per the applicant, if they were to shift the building westwards to comply with the 200-foot setback, it would affect the drainage of the site by placing the building in the path of the natural water flow from north to south of the site. This would create additional need for engineering in the construction of the building and possibly future flooding issues because you're altering the natural course of the waterway. The shifting will also place the building further away from the existing and approved septic field system, which means additional excavation and more piping system. The main access drive, if you look at the property on your plot plan sheets, is located through an easement through the abutting property to the west, while the access drive to that property is located on an easement on the subject property. So it's sort of reciprocal. They get something out of this property, and the dog club gets something out of their property. Now, if they were to shift the building to meet with the 200-foot setback requirement, you would have to alter all the existing access easements that have been in place for a long time, which means new legal documents, new access. It is a very complicated and convoluted process to do that. Any of these reasons, either excessive excavation, new piping for a septic system, creating additional engineering to address any drainage or flooding issues, or redoing all the easements, all of these could potentially be very burdensome, both financially and logistically. The second criteria, the variance will provide substantial justice to the applicant as well as other property owners in the district. We believe approval of the variance will provide substantial justice to the applicant by allowing them to build a structure in an area of maximum convenience on the site. It's not really adverse to the interests of other property owners in the district. The site does abut single-family dwellings to the east, the direction in which the setback variance is being sought from. However, there is dense landscaping along this yard space, and the Planning Commission is reviewing landscaping plan along this site so that the landscaping is boosted up to account for the reduced setback. Third criteria is the variance requested is the minimum variance needed to provide substantial relief. As I had mentioned, the location seems to have been determined by stormwater flow on the site, location of the septic field, and access easement. The site abuts single-family dwellings to the east. Although these are single-family dwellings, those properties are zoned GI, general industrial. So the residential use on those properties are legal, non-conforming residential uses. So technically it abuts industrial property that's being used as residential, but is significantly buffered by existing and proposed landscaping and tree cover. The fourth criteria is the need for the variance is due to unique circumstances that are peculiar to the land, structure, and building involved, and not generally applicable in the area or to other properties in the same zoning district. The 6.26 acres is considerably below the minimum requirement of 10 acres, and the use has been in operation on the site for over 30 years, from what we understand, which likely predates the zoning ordinance. On a smaller lot, compliance with setbacks would be challenging. While not necessarily unique, we do have a lot of non-conforming properties, larger ones in the township. The property is also challenged by the location of septic field, your stormwater detention, which basically the physical features and the topography of the site would dictate where exactly you can place this building on the site. The next and final consideration is the problem and resulting need for the variance has been created by strict compliance with the zoning ordinance and not by the applicant or the applicant's predecessors. That is, it is not self-created. It is likely that the use predates what our zoning regulations are. I haven't been able to find enough history to let me know at what point of time the kennels requirement was adopted, but it most likely was adopted after the dog club came into existence. The non-conforming lot size restricts the area available for use by the applicant and is a pre-existing situation which has not been created by the applicant. Finally, the variance will be in harmony with the spirit and intent of the ordinance and will not be injurious to the neighborhood or detrimental to public health, safety, and welfare. We believe the variance that they have requested is not likely to have any adverse impacts on the neighborhood or public health, safety, and welfare. The intent of zoning and planning is to provide for an orderly development and use of land. And side yard setbacks are typically intended and required in the ordinance so that you maintain spacing between abutting properties to protect that health, safety, and welfare. In the event of an emergency, vehicles need to be able to get through or you need to be able to leave the site. The proposed building, while it is located closer than required to the property line, there is significant landscaping and it's still 61 feet away from the property line and at a much greater distance than an actual structure to the east. This use involves dogs being brought to the site by the owners for training and leaving the site at the end of the day, which is what differentiates it significantly from a kennel. It is our understanding there will be no overnight stay of dogs, and this is a place where owners show up with their dogs in order to train the animals, and the dogs are not kept overnight. They do leave back home. I would defer to the applicant who is present here tonight to answer any other questions the board might have about the actual use of the site itself. I will reserve my recommendations and findings for after the public hearing. Thank you.
Would anybody like to speak regarding this topic? Yes, please.
Good evening. My name is Dave Hughes. I'm with Vanston O'Brien, and we are the applicant for the Ann Arbor Dog Training Club. I'm here with a number of members of the club with me to answer any questions, but Vidya said exactly everything that I was going to say, so I don't want to repeat it. So, but very good summary of what's going on. So, but I'm here to answer any questions.
Mr. Hughes, if you could just describe what the dog kennel does, club does exactly, so the board understands how it is very different from a kennel, like you had explained to me when we did our initial meetings.
I do want to defer to whoever wants to volunteer.
Come to the microphone, please.
Mary Westhoff. I'm the president of the Ann Arbor Dog Training Club right now. And basically, we train people to train their dogs. That's one of our main things, is teaching people to train their dogs from puppies on up through general obedience. We also have certain sporting events, if you will, for dogs. We run agility trials. We have obedience trials and things like that, performance events. As Dave said, the dogs are never kept, they're not allowed to be kept on the property without their owners, their handlers there. It's usually one-on-one, occasionally 2 or 3 dogs with one handler, but that's it. The dogs are, during classes, they're there for an hour and a half. For some of our events, they may be there half of the day or a full day on the weekends. But they're there with their owners, they're on lead. None of them are allowed to run on the property. And actually moving our events indoors would reduce any noise pollution, if you will, because we've been running outdoor agility trials for the past 20, 30 years with no problems. Does that answer your question?
We have any other questions they want to ask?
Yeah, I mean, how many dogs maximum would there be at one time? I mean, is there, a dozen? Can you have as many as 25 when you have competition?
When we have competitions, there's probably more than that. There may
Okay.
there may be up to 100 dogs.
Oh,
But they're all mostly inside crated. There's only maybe a half a dozen or a dozen outdoors on lead with their owners.
right. Yeah, because I noticed in your plan that I guess the west side of the building, you have a big area for dog crating, so obviously the people bring their dogs and the
They bring their
smaller
dogs,
in
they
the
bring their
crate.
crates. Yes,
Right.
yeah.
And what will happen with the other 2 buildings? I mean, are they still going to be utilized?
Yes.
This is going to be your big competition?
This will be
arena?
our big competition for agility and for some other performance events. We'll still use both buildings for classes because one building, actually, we have a greater demand for classes than we can fill because of time and space.
Okay, yeah, because I noticed the area where the new building's going, it was a big fenced-in area. That must have been where you had the events
Actually,
before.
it's outside, it is fenced,
Well,
yeah.
close, but
Yeah, yes, it's right straight across the parking lot from the present building.
Okay, thank you.
I'd just like to ask, and I want to make sure I heard you correct. There's no dogs left on site without the owners ever being present with their animals?
Absolutely true.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, we do not allow any dogs to be there without their owners.
I have a question for you.
I'm sorry? Yeah.
Where do the owners take their dogs to relieve themselves?
Out in the field, out next, well, actually right now they're going out where the building will be, it'll probably be behind that. They are required to clean up after their dogs. We provide cleanup materials. We provide garbage cans all around the perimeter of the place. And if we catch anybody that doesn't pick up after their dogs, we get after them.
So the open space would be on the east side of the site for the dogs?
Yes.
Okay.
West
and on the west. Yeah, that's right.
Around the detention basin?
You said where the proposed building is going is where they go now to.
It's part of it, and there's various areas around there. There's down at the, what would it be, the east end of the old building. They can use that area. West end? Right. Yeah.
Next to advanced disposal,
Yeah.
there's a fence line.
Okay.
Back of the property all the way up to the driveway, which actually is part of our property.
Could you come to the?
Yeah, we
the,
would need you to come to the
that way we
mic.
c- it makes it
because this
easier
is
for them to-
televised.
Oh, that's okay. No.
No,
you
to the
can
mic.
come You can come to the microphone.
Kitty Burkhart, 6187 Nowler, Whitmore Lake. What Mary said was east, and where we go right now for puppy classes are in the older buildings, and we go across the parking lot into where we propose the new building to be. That's used a lot. With the new building, you would have the 61 feet on the east side, because there will be, you can get access that property. But more likely, because a lot of puppy classes are in that further west building, they will go across the driveway into that field area next to advanced disposal. That is all green space right now, because the retention pond, if I understand it, Dave, is going to be on the west side of the building. Exactly, southwest. But if you go, it's not going to cross over the driveway or the right-of-way. So that west area property is probably the most available green space for the dogs. But like Mary said, there's, you pick up after them. And we have mailboxes and plastic bags and all of that. Did that answer?
It did, thank you.
Uh-huh.
So I had a question in regards to the stormwater detention basin. That is new
Yes, ma'am.
to the site? Okay.
Correct. We are in review with the county water resource department. We don't have a final approval, but that's our concept that we're showing on the plan right now.
It will be based upon getting this 18,000 square foot building, right? You're not gonna build that until you get the building, right? 'Cause it's.
Absolutely,
That
yeah.
other hard space, hard surface is gonna create the need for that, right?
Correct, correct.
Okay.
Are there any neighbors of this property that are here? Yes. Would you like to come up and speak?
My name's Jack Sechrist. I live at 7140 Nowler, so I'm very near where we're talking about. I have to say, during the time we've been there, we've had no issues at all with these folks and what they're doing. The only thing I would say is a 61-foot setback is not very much of a setback. No matter what the landscaping is, that's not very much of a setback. So it's way different from 200 feet. To me, it's not enough. But I guess that's all I'll say.
Are you adjacent to this property?
No, not directly adjacent, no.
So nobody adjacent here?
Apparently not. Yeah, we're close, but up on the east side of Nowler and a little bit further north. Yep. Yep. But I go by this every day, multiple times.
Sure.
I understand the situation. I'll stick with what I said. A 61-foot setback is not very much of a setback, regardless of what the Planning Commission does with the landscaping. Thanks.
Thanks very much. Anyone else want to speak on this matter? Mary, are you the owner? The president?
Yeah, I'm the president of the club.
President, I'm sorry.
Right.
Okay, so I actually sort of do have a question. I mean, it is a substantial difference in a setback, right? We currently have, 200 feet versus 61 feet. What other, your size of your building is 18,000
18,000 square feet.
Is that pretty much the minimum size you need for the?
Yes, sir, it is. the AKC requires 10,000 square feet just for the arena part of it to run a master excellent agility trial. So we have to have that, and then we have to have crating and some area for the equipment and things like that. So it'd be difficult to build a smaller building.
May I say something? Sure. So there is a possibility, and in fact, it wouldn't create much of a hardship. We do have a few feet to play with after I've been, had a chance to do the grading plan, but I mean, 61 foot, we could get it up to 70 feet. If it helps, I mean, we can move it a little bit without causing.
Sure.
But
It's still a pretty substantial difference.
well, the reason that the requirement is there to begin with is it has everything to do with the kennel use and the sound transmission to the neighbors from dog trainings or dog kennels.
Sure.
And we don't have any of those conditions.
What would be the normal setback required for commercial building in that space?
Just check. I think the
Side yard
yards-
setback, I believe, is 20 feet.
For a commercial building?
Well, no, if we go into general industrial
It's a
district,
GI.
it would be 50 feet.
50
So it
foot
meets
side.
that requirement, it doesn't meet the requirement of
Correct.
a kennel.
For a
So
kennel.
the kennel issue that kind of.
Right.
So if we were to read it in a different way, as an light industrial, they'd be.
General industrial, they
general
would be
industrial
compliant.
would be very compliant.
Mr. Hughes is correct. The reason why the 200-foot setback was put in was specific to kennel use. Kennel means overnight boarding of dogs.
Sure.
At night, dogs do
Sure.
bark,
Yeah.
and 200-foot distance provides for a mitigation of the noise. Noise dissipates as it travels over distance.
Yeah.
And also, when you have a kennel where dogs are kept overnight and the owners are not there, there is a fenced-in area and the dogs are allowed to run. So you want to make sure that you give a larger setback, so even if the dogs are outside and barking, it's not hurt. In this case, the owners are with the dogs at all point of time, and the whole facility seems to be tuned towards training them to be obedient rather than run loose, which is not what the regulations are technically designed for. So I believe even though the setback is less, 61 feet, if this were a general industrial district use, like you pointed out, it would comply with the required side yard setback, which would be 50 feet.
So what you're saying then too is that the other buildings in that area have a setback of 50, or
Yes.
generally 50-foot setback.
Yes.
So when you look at this, it doesn't look out of place in that area because it's pretty standard in that area. In fact, if somebody were to build to their east, they would only be required to have a 50-foot setback.
Or,
Fair to say?
or if the dog kennel were ever, if this property were ever to change to another
Sure.
general industrial use, it would be a fully compliant building.
Right.
It would be a compliant building,
Okay. That's an important distinction.
yes.
That's important.
Sir, would you mind stepping back up to the microphone just for a moment? Yeah. And I apologize, I didn't catch your name the first time.
Jack Seacrest.
Mr. Seacrest?
Yep.
Why do you feel that 61 feet isn't a large enough variance for, a large enough distance from the property line?
Well, I know how far 60 feet is, or 61 feet is, and it's not very far. My driveway is that wide, and I just think that it's not enough space. So I don't know about the barking. All dogs bark, and these dogs will bark. They're mostly inside. But as I say, we've never had any issue with them. I don't know how many dogs have been there previously, but it's not been an issue. We have neighbors that have dogs that are dramatically worse. Without naming any names of the neighbors, we do. But this is not a kennel, but on the other hand, it's not an office building either. And I think that a little more space makes a lot of sense. But I understand the realities of what's going on here, and they're
But noise is the issue that you have with the 61 feet, basically?
No, not necessarily, no. I think it's too close no matter what. But noise is certainly an issue. But in our area, noise travels rather well, and it doesn't diminish very much at all. I have neighbors 300 yards away, and I hear their dogs like they were right next door. So it is a problem.
Okay.
Could be. Anyhow,
Thank you.
Yeah.
Is there anyone else who would like to speak on this matter?
I guess I still have one more question.
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
What would the typical hours of operation be when you have performance events or agility events? What time would they typically start at and end at?
Generally, they start somewhere between 7 and 9 o'clock in the morning, and they're almost always finished well before 5.
Okay.
And they're weekends. They're not weeknight things.
You said you don't do weekends?
Our trials and things are all weekends,
Are all
Friday,
weekends,
Saturday,
okay.
and Sunday. Our classes are usually during the week, and they typically run from 5 o'clock until 8 or 9 at night, but they're indoors.
Are you going to be doing your training then in the existing buildings, is that kind of the game plan?
We plan on doing obedience and some other, and a lot of other things in the old building. We will probably have our agility classes in the new building because the equipment will be there.
Chairman Safranek, I have a question. Video, what is the lot to the east zoned?
GI, general industrial.
So the house is zoned general industrial?
Yes,
The ordinance requires for, is it used as residential?
yes,
Okay, so it is a residential use zone GI.
yeah.
The ordinance requires if a lot abuts a parcel in the residential district, an additional 50-foot transition strip. I understand that this
the
is zoned,
residential.
Yeah.
you said it was used residential.
It's used residential but zoned general industrial. The ordinance requirement is for if it is zoned
Correct,
residential.
correct. But if the intent of the ordinance is to protect a residential use, should we not then consider a greater protection of the residential use that's to the east?
That is a point of consideration, but the intent of the ordinance also is to phase out nonconformities.
True.
Under state law, nonconformities need to be phased out over the time. So there is the directive through state that if it's an existing, the dwelling can remain indefinitely, it can be sold, it can be, but if ever the owner of the dwelling should decide they are moving out and an industrial use comes in there, it would be allowed. And that's,
Yes,
that's
that is
what
true.
we,
Yes.
So I think trying to phase out nonconformities from a community under state law is actually a more priority issue than trying to provide a buffer for a non-conforming, a legal but non-conforming use in a district.
I just worry about this then pushing out I mean, we do want to get rid of the non-conforming
Right.
uses. I understand that. It's just, my concern is that the person that is there already. I have a question for Mr. Hughes about the grading plan. So I was looking at the existing contours, and it looks like from the northeast corner of the building, you've got an existing contour of 921, and then you're grading it to the bottom of the basin at 917. It looks to me, just based on the existing contours, that there would be room to move the building farther west. Based on the contours, and still have a detention basin. How are you managing stormwater now?
It's all sheet flow.
Sheet
and
flow?
right straight into the wetland area to the south. There is no detention currently. This is, strictly
Straight sheet flow.
sheet flow.
All right, so any idea how much grading you're going to be doing? I mean, cubic yard wise?
Yes, as a matter of fact, there's about 2,000 cubic yards of material that we have to balance in order to get the grades that you see there. Like I mentioned earlier, we can shift the building to the west slightly without getting, encroaching into the stormwater detention area and, having to move all that to the west also. But 200 foot was impossible to do and without huge consequences in the site.
2,000 cubic yards is quite, so what, put it in comparison to if we move the building to the west?
I
What
would,
kind of contour?
I would not even ask that, because really, in a general industrial area, he is conforming. It's just because he's a kennel, because of the kennel use, it isn't. And they're not even using it as a kennel. And I wanted to also bring up is the neighbor that is to the west, his garage is non-conforming. It's less than 61 feet from the property line. So,
To the west?
You mean to the east?
to the east. Yeah, to the east. Gould. That one area that's where it starts saying site information, that's actually a garage.
Okay.
So he's more non-conforming than they are.
Right, but what we are considering right now is the dimensional variance for
The 61
the
feet.
61 feet.
Which is within, if it was general industrial,
It
he
wasn't
would
general
be,
industrial.
he would
So-
be in the right, he would be
So
right.
let me throw this out there, because we're saying that it's a general industrial use, and he's conforming for general industrial use, this seems to me like we're wading into territory of a use variance, because
I think
I'd
it's,
like Vidya's, and especially since now members have asked about a plan of operation, that is not, that again goes to use. That is not something we can consider. Either the dimensional variance is okay or it is not, even if they operate 24 hours a day.
Right.
We are considering only the dimensional use. We cannot
Exactly.
consider the use. If we consider the use, then it makes me a little nervous that we're wading into territory that we cannot go.
we can answer that two ways. First thing is we don't want to wade into the use because we don't want to get into a discussion of it being a use variance. That said, the whole need for the variance was triggered because it was considered similar to another use. It is a fact that our zoning ordinance, it's impossible for a zoning ordinance to account for every single use that is out there. There was a time when we used to have just drugstores. Nobody even thought of drugstores with drive-thrus. I personally remember when I got the first CVS application with the drive-thru, I thought to myself, who on earth goes to a drive-thru to pick up medicines? And now I can't imagine people doing anything else. So ordinances had to be changed to account for the use. By the same token, our ordinance does not have anything called as a dog club. It is a very valid land use, but we don't have provisions for it. It would be a stretch to consider it similar to a club for humans and put it in that category because that's not what it is. That said, we are not exactly wading into use territory category, but if the use is similar to another use that is provided for in the ordinance, the zoning ordinance does give the zoning administrator the leeway to make that interpretation without it traveling into the use variance category. And that is where my initial report estimation as a zoning administrator came in. This is not a kennel. It is not a use that is not allowed either. It is similar to. So, barring all other places, where else would you like to put such a use? A general industrial district is the perfect place to put it. You wouldn't want to see it in your commercial districts. So, the building and the use is located optimally where we would prefer to have such a use. That said, it is not technically fitting into the category of what a kennel is, so they were subject to the same standards which threw in the 200-foot setback, although what the 200-foot was initially intended for is not materially relevant to the type of use that they operate in here, considering they have the dogs inside most of the time, except during special events they're outside, and there's no overnight dogs. The biggest impact with kennels is overnight stay of dogs. So, I understand the reluctance. I'm as reluctant as anybody else when recommending approval for a variance, but in this case, I think the limitations of the land itself, the way the topography is, we wouldn't want them to comply with a setback that would create engineering issues or stuff. There was a time when under state law you could not consider financial hardship as a valid reason, but that has since changed. If the burden placed on the project is going to be so much, that it makes the project's feasibility go away completely, then it can be considered under the provisions of the variance. So I believe at this time, the way the site is situated, the fact that it probably predates our zoning ordinance regulations, it's got engineering considerations, it's got a septic field located, we are talking about increased pipelines, which means additional engineering and issues possibly related to that. All things considered, the variance for the setback that is being requested for the use is not beyond the realm of good planning.
And I just want to clear up one thing in your letter under paragraph 2.
Yes.
There's existing dense landscaping along this yard space, and the applicant is proposing significant landscape improvements which were acceptable to the Planning Commission. The Planning Commission may know we did not decide anything on the vegetation strip. We sent it all back to Patrick. Yeah, we wanted all of these issues taken care of before we considered
In that
the
case,
site.
when
Yeah,
the applicant
yeah.
reappears before landscaping
Yeah.
will be looked at, just to make sure
Right,
that.
right. I just
issues.
want to make that
Thank
clear.
you.
And thank you for your explanation, Vidya. I appreciate
Okay.
it.
Well, I have a question, because I was looking at the Exhibit A that
Yes.
they sent in.
Yes.
And they said at one time, or they said the township classified them as option 8, as other, under the GI zoning. Is that valid? Is there a record of that when they first built? Or is that just a generic statement they're hoping for?
I'm sure the applicant has done their homework. Unfortunately, some of the township records are not as complete as I would like to see them. There is a lot of loopholes, not recorded determinations. So I'm trying to reconstruct something in the past which would place the applicant in a very tenuous position of somebody said something. It's better to have the slate clean and make sure the records are accurate from now on. So
Well, then-
they might be right, but there's no way for me to verify that. Mary has not been able to help me pull out enough information, and she's searched a lot.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, she's done a lot of
A
homework.
lot of it has to do with records. where the
Records.
Records are stored.
Right. But should we consider that option 8 since it's not a kennel? It's a club? I mean, should we put that in their request as GI, as an option 8, as an other, and then they comply with all our setbacks?
I would,
Is that-
once, I think we traveled that road and we made a determination it wouldn't fall into the club category because that places them in a category with a lot of adult-based uses too. They all fall into the club category. We don't want to send them there because they don't belong anywhere near there. So let's not go there. We will stay with the dogs where we are.
Dogs don't wear clothes.
Some do.
Some have little outfits, though.
So I'm still just kind of a little confused is why we're comparing this to a kennel or even using the word kennel at all when there's no dogs.
I think that was the applicant's concern too. If we are not a kennel, why are we being subjected to the kennel standards? That is because the ordinance does not have a category for you. We have placed you as a similar use, and categorizing you as a similar use does not exempt you from the requirements of that use.
But wouldn't a similar use be more something like a dog grooming as opposed to dog kennel, where dogs may not stay overnight? And
That is interesting because we have received requests for dog grooming in downtown areas where the use would not be allowed, and we have classified dog grooming the same as a beauty parlor for women. It's no different. They're just dogs.
the other thing, and I had some help, is looking up the noise ordinance, and their time frame falls within the noise ordinance is from 10 o'clock at night to 7 in the morning, so.
I live a mile away. I never hear them.
And if there is any noise, I'm sure they will hear from the neighbors before we hear, and code enforcement will be out there, so.
Vidya, maybe you can answer. I think part of what Amy's getting at, or at least it's made me think of, is it the case that if we were to allow this, they could put a kennel out there?
Not without, kennels, Let me go to the GI
I
district.
just want to make sure we're clear on that. I just want to make sure we're clear on that. Because I thought that was sort of the nature of the question, and if it's not, it's my question. So I just want to make sure we're clear on that.
No, their use is being approved as a dog training center with no overnight stay. All the use profile that they have provided, that when they came before the planning commission, even before the planning commission, what they came with the zoning administrator, a copy of the zoning administrator's approval is in your packet. And that sets out exactly what the scope of the use is. It's very clearly categorized. You cannot swap uses as, just because I said similar to doesn't mean you can say, okay, now we can switch to a kennel, and I don't think that is their intent.
No, but part of our job.
Yeah, technically, absolutely,
Right,
you're
part
right.
of our job, right, is to say, hey, you know what, Mary, I know, is very young, and this club's been going on forever, right? And who knows, the next ownership or whoever's in charge might say, you know what, we've decided we'd like to move on here. We've been here a long time, but let's go find another location, and they sell the property to a kennel, and then all of a sudden we have a kennel in there, and
Absolutely.
that's the. Am I missing your concern, or was that?
No,
I'm sorry,
and that's
maybe
part of it, and I don't understand why we couldn't allow a kennel there. We are not approving the use. We are approving the setback.
Correct.
Yeah.
It is a use permitted in the GI district with it's a conditional use, correct?
Correct.
The next person who wants to come in, let's say they sell in 10 years, 15 years. I hope that doesn't happen, but let's say it does. They're going to come in and say, well, the township approved that variance for the setback. We are not considering the use at all. We are only considering the dimensional setback
Correct.
because that is the only thing we can consider.
Which
If we
guides
didn't
us-
know, if we did not know what the use was, we would have to have that. We still have to find the findings the same way. How then are we going to then say, no, you cannot have a kennel?
Because it'd be a non-conforming use.
They
for a
would have,
kennel.
And they will be, and the applicant would be in and say, it's a nonconformity, we had nothing to do with it.
right. They would have to come back to the township and get a use permit.
I think, Amy, you answered the
If it
question
ever-
pretty
if it
clearly
ever
yourself.
sold.
You are granting approval only for the setback
Only
variance.
for the
You
setback.
are not granting approval of
Of
the
the
use at
use.
all. The planning commission is granting site plan and conditional use
For
approval
the
for this.
condition, right, so
So
that
the
it-
next
yes.
buyer of this property, if the use is not what the dog training club does, they will have to go through the whole process again. They are not grandfathered in or already granted. The only thing they are granted is the fact that the building is placed where it is. That is all they
Right.
get.
Right. The
They still
building
have
is
to come,
grandfathered.
yes.
Yes, the building, and the term grandfather no longer applies once a variance is granted. It means it's a legal structure.
Right.
Grandfather is if it doesn't meet the ordinance and has just been there with no approvals. So-
They still have to come back to the planning
Absolutely.
commission for a
Absolutely.
conditional use permit and site plan review. But before they do that, they have to get the variance because the planning commission cannot grant variances.
Correct.
They have, that's why they're here first.
Correct.
Any other questions? Comments? Thoughts? Anybody from the audience? There's a lot of you here. Sure nobody else wants to say a few words? You don't have to. I'm not making anybody talk, but I don't want to feel like anybody felt we deprived them of their opportunity.
Dick Ratliff, I'm on the building committee. To answer this gentleman's comment about why are we using kennel, it's because of the word dog in our name. If we were Ann Arbor training facility, there wouldn't be a dog, there wouldn't be a kennel. To answer this young lady's comment about shifting further west, Marlene, I'm sorry, my throat is really bad, and Steve and Paul from Lydia's office were out on site, and he said, well, they'll flip the pond over. And he looked at the topography of the property and said, no, we can't do that because it naturally flows. And where we're proposing the retention pond, in the winter, it's all iced up in that area. So that's why that pond should be there. It flows downhill. The exercise area, I think you might be confused. The new exercise area for the dogs to relieve themselves will be on the west end of the property across the access roads. Basically, road going to Advance goes north, east, and west. The road coming into our property is north and south. It'll be in that northwesterly corner, which is all green space. And it shall remain green space. I don't know. That's all I got to say. But Steve and Marlene were out and they were looking at the pictures, and they said basically what you're talking about, and they were in the building, and around the building, there's no kennel runs, there's no cages or anything for kennels. It's not a kennel. I talked to Marlene and Steve, and they were looking at the picture on the wall, and they said basically all you're putting up here is a very expensive pole barn. And that's pretty much all it is, with a clear span over the arena area.
Yep, thank you very much. Yeah, I kind of, somebody made the comment, I thought it was kind of spot on. It's not as much about training dogs as it is about training the people who are responsible for the dogs. It's just like with parenting, it's not the kids, it's the parents that you got to train, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Kitty Burkhardt again, and I just wanted to say we're down this direction because we came to the township early on and said we are a club. This is where we are. And Vidya directed us to similar to a kennel because the Planning Commission had done that with the GI. This property was originally LI and then got changed when Bloom came in and was upgraded to GI, so which is probably 25 years ago or 20 years ago. But we followed the township's directions all the way down. So that's why we're here. We're following the direction that the township has given us so that we can, dot all the i's and cross all the t's and make sure everything is done correctly.
Correct.
We want to work with you guys. We want to create a nice training facility that will bring in revenue for the township.
Yes. The dog training club has
Thank
worked
you.
with the township from the beginning, and we had several meetings just to discuss the use and break down every aspect of the use before we decided which category they would fit in. It wasn't done just through emails or just review. We had sit-down meetings, went over every aspect of their training, hours of operation, and I think they've been pretty good about working with the township to try and get it to a position where this use contributes meaningfully to the community, even though it's already done that by being here for 30 plus years.
Yeah.
So they're pretty good.
Thank you.
Any other comments? Okay, I'd like to call we have nothing else? Yeah, we have no other matters to discuss, so I'd like to close the public hearing sections of this meeting. May I have a motion in that regard?
I'll make the motion to close the public hearing.
Second?
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Public hearing part of the meeting is now closed. Old business. Do we have any old business to attend to? Nope, I'm not aware of any. Okay, new business. New business we have in front of us, as previously talked about in the public hearing, case number JZBA 170005, the Ann Arbor Dog Training Club. Board, what is your pleasure here?
If I may present my recommendations and
Sure,
findings.
yes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Based on our review of the proposal and the information that was presented to us by the applicant, it is our recommendation that the Zoning Board of Appeals approve the requested variance for the Ann Arbor Dog Training Club to be located at 1575 East North Territorial Road, based on the following findings of fact. Compliance with the ordinance standards would place an excessive burden on the applicant financially and logistically, which could likely make the project non-feasible. The second finding is that the need for the variance is due to natural stormwater flow pathway, location of approved septic fields, and existing access easements. The third finding is, I apologize, the non-conforming lot likely predates the zoning ordinance requirements. The fourth finding is the variance will provide substantial justice to the applicant and is not adverse to the interests of other property owners. The fifth finding is the reduced setback is mitigated by the applicants by the existing landscaping and will be reviewed by the Planning Commission at the time of site plan and conditional use permit review for additional landscaping. The variance requested is the minimum possible. The variance will have no detrimental effect on public health, safety, and welfare. And finally, the variance requested is not adverse to the spirit and intent of the zoning ordinance. Subsequent to the approval of the variance, the applicant does need Planning Commission approval, and then any other conformance to the building department codes and whatever approvals they need from the county for the stormwater detention. Thank you.
Thank you. What's your pleasure? Can I get a motion to approve the request consistent with the recommendations and findings set forth by Vidya here? Can I get a motion in that regard?
I motion to approve.
Can I get a second? Second?
I think that we have to add on there that, that the variance that has to have with final approval from the Planning Commission and from the Washtenaw County on the stormwater basin as well.
Okay. Subject to that friendly amendment? Any other discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion passes. Okay.
Got your variance.
You're welcome. Yeah, I'll have to send some people over there I know to have them trained by you all. Not about the dogs at all. Yeah. Yeah. I want to know which one of you will take a dog for about 6 months for somebody. That's what I really know. It's not, yeah. I was given a dog about 5 years ago, and when I was given that dog, it had been trained probably by somebody who came to your classes, and that dog was the best trained dog I'd ever been around. 6 years later, it ain't still the best trained dog around. You got it. That's exactly my point. That's exactly my point. Yeah.
The
Thank
dogs
you all
train
very
the
much.
owners.
Yeah, the dog was just fine.
Thank you.
Okay, approval of the minutes of September 18th, 2017. What's your pleasure?
I just got one little issue, an extra 2 under front of the page, paragraph, under the motion,
Which one page? Where are you? Front of it or back?
front page, no, front of the page.
Yep, motion.
Right side,
Yep.
little paragraph, Corey Cadet said he is attempting to purchase this property to build a house. He said the intent is just one extra 2.
Yep, you're correct.
That's it.
Subject to that amendment. Do I have a motion?
I'll make the motion to accept the minutes to the September 18th
As corrected.
as corrected.
Second?
Second?
Second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Call to the public. It looks like we have none. They've all
Public
evacuated
left.
the building. Anyone have any other comments?
Oh, I would just like to make sure that the board is invited. There is a special joint meeting between the Township Board of Trustees and the Planning Commission, and I believe the Zoning Board of Appeals also on October 24th, which is next Tuesday.
Next Tuesday.
I'll be there anyway.
It's, I'm sure, I'll ask Mary to send out what time you need it, because initially I think the board and the Planning Commission are meeting to discuss some issues, but Paul and myself will be present, I think at 8:15, Marlene told
Okay.
us. We'll be there to talk about what the zoning administrator's role is, and I'm sure sometimes you hear concerns from residents, like, why is this rule being enforced? Why are you suddenly doing this? So we'll probably be able to give an explanation to understand why this book is important. And if we don't like something, we can always change it, but we can't forget to not see.
Right.
We're not going to see it. We can't do that.
Right.
So maybe that would help clarify it better and also address some rumors. Sometimes somebody says something and it just travels and the story changes halfway through. So,
Yep, that's how it happens. I know that story.
so if you could come to that meeting, that would be great.
Okay, great, super, thank you. And the next meeting is November 20th, 2017. I don't know whether we have anything.
warranted.
Did
Right
you
now,
say
we don't have anything.
Right now,
Right
nothing?
now, we don't
Okay.
have anything.
And then, that's a Monday, okay, yeah. Okay. And move to adjourn.
I support.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Thank you all.